Hi everyone, welcome to the third and final video of my MCAT 2015 series. This video would be focusing mainly on Foundational Concept 1C, and over here I've actually written out what Foundational Concept 1C is. And it's stated that it is it's focusing on the transmission of heritable information from generation to generation and the processes that increase genetic diversity. And when they talk about heritable information, they mean DNA. And then passing it on from generation to generation obviously means reproduction. And then the processes that increase genetic diversity are the ones that increase variability of the DNA. So one thing that I want to mention right off the bat that's a little off topic is that there's a very important process that actually decreases genetic diversity, and that is natural selection. I know that this doesn't really play into this foundational concept, but natural selection is just so important that we need to make mention of it. And I'm just going to put a note that it actually decreases genetic diversity. Okay, so when we talk about transmission of heritable information, there are two main ways that DNA can be transmitted. These two ways are sexual reproduction versus asexual, right? In asexual reproduction, when organisms reproduce through this method, the offspring all end up being clones of the parent, so you end up with clones, whereas with sexual reproduction there is a greater variability of DNA, so greater DNA variability, right? And so this video is going to focus, did I spell that right? Variability, yep. So this video is going to focus on these processes that increase the DNA variability in sexual reproduction. So before I actually go into the processes that increase genetic variability in eukaryotes, I'm going to point out that there are processes that prokaryotes carry out as well to increase genetic diversity, and I've listed them here. They are transformation, transduction, and conjugation. And we'll be mainly focusing on eukaryotes, so the main processes that they go through are crossing over, independent assortment, and random fertilization. So let's first talk a little bit about crossing over. So here I've drawn two chromosomes. One is from the father and one's from the mother. And as you can see, these colors represent the various genes that are found within that chromosome, and they're found in the same region. So the purple represents the same gene, one in the father's chromosome and one in the mother's chromosome, or the copy of the chromosome that comes from the father and that comes from the mother. And because these genes are homologous, or because they're identical or similar, I should say, these two chromosomes are capable of pairing up with each other. So they come close when they have to synthesize the second, when they have to duplicate, essentially. And when duplication occurs, an interesting phenomenon also occurs. So let's actually take another color, and so just say synthesis starts here, right? So it starts here, progresses down the chromosome, and then it realizes, oh hey, this is really close to that chromosome and it's similar, so I'll just cross over there. And then it copies this chromosome, and then it goes along until it finds another gene that is very similar to what the neighboring gene is, and then it crosses over back to that neighboring gene. So what you end up with is the blue, or the father's top portion of the chromosome, the mother's middle part of the chromosome, and then again the father's bottom part of the chromosome, and that's what you see here. So that's this that I've drawn after crossing over. Okay, and so that's essentially what crossing over is. It's because these homologous chromosomes get so close to each other that while being copied, they actually cross over and copy part of the other homologous chromosome. And this actually leads to genetic diversity because these genes are not completely identical. They're alleles, which means that they are the same gene, but they have slight differences within them. So the next process that I'm going to cover is the independent assortment, and some people call it the law of independent assortment. Alleles are just varieties of the same gene. So for example, say we have the gene for eye color, right? So eye color gene. An allele for eye color gene would be the blue allele. And then another allele would be the green allele. So these are just varieties of the same type of gene. And here the law of independent assortment states that these alleles are passed on to future generations independent of each other eye color. I know this probably isn't the best example because we have to factor in recessive eye colors versus dominant eye colors, but essentially what it's saying is that alleles have an equal likelihood of being passed on. So next I'm going to talk about random fertilization. So here I've drawn a group of sperm, and this is an ovum. The first sperm makes contact with the ovum. This wall hardens, disabling any other sperm from donating their chromosomes to the ovum and thus fertilizing them. So these sperm would then not be able to give their chromosomes. It's just the first one that makes contact that would be able to. So this is important for genetic diversity because we know that each of these sperm are genetically distinct. The likelihood of having two sperm with every single gene being identical is highly unlikely and almost impossible in biology. One of these sperm will make contact first, and thus randomly there's a selection for this DNA to be passed on. And if the sperm were first in line, then we could have randomly gotten the DNA from that. Finally, I want to explain the significance of genetic variants. So we've talked about these processes, but why is it important that they exist? So for example, let's just say that this is located in Wonkaland. In Wonkaland you get mint-flavored leaves, and in these mint leaves you have candy bugs living in them, and there are two kinds of candy bugs that populate these leaves, mainly raspberry candy bugs and mint candy bugs, and the mint candy bugs match the mint leaves very closely. And as with every ecosystem, there has to be a predator to put these innocent candy bugs at danger, and that will be accomplished by our cartoon obese boy over here. And of course he is just too hungry to even notice the mint candy bugs, so he immediately goes for the ones that are most visible, and that's the raspberry candy bugs. And over time these are all eaten away. So the ones that remain are the mint candy bugs, not because they are any better than the raspberry candy bugs, but because the predator is more capable of eating these than he is of seeing this as quickly. So now the story actually connects back to genetic variants because it is through these three processes that we talked about that the existence of two different kinds of candy bugs has been accomplished. If, for example, only the raspberry candy bugs were to live and these mint candy bugs never existed, then all of the raspberry candy bugs would have been eaten and thus they would have gone extinct. But since genetic variants occurred, we have different colored candy bugs. Some of them are just better suited for the environment randomly, and through natural selection, that's the important word, they get selected to be populated over generations. And with that, I will end the last of my series of 3 videos for the MCAT 2015 Foundational Concept 1. Thank you.